Hi everyone, I am Heather, and I want to welcome you to Magnificent Authors Podcast, brought to you by Magnificent Mamas. This is the show where we'll celebrate the magic of storytelling and the power of words. I'm your host, Heather, and each week I'll be sitting down with incredible authors from all walks of life to explore their creative journeys, uncover their writing secrets, and delve into worlds they create. Whether you are an aspiring writer, a passionate reader, or simply curious about the minds behind your favorite books, this is the podcast for you. So grab a cozy blanket, pour yourself a cup of tea, and get ready to be inspired by the magnificent authors who join us. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I am Heather with Magnificent Mamas and Magnificent Authors Podcast. We're joined here today with author Thea Lyons. Thea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, it's lovely to be here. So you can call me Thea, and I am a fantasy writer based in the UK, and I'm really excited to be here and chat with you about books.
Well, awesome, and thank you so much, and it's awesome to have you here. So you had a book recently come out, correct?
Yes, in March.
In March. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it is a dark fantasy novel. It's a supernatural mystery that's set in an alternate contemporary version of York here in the UK. And it follows a witch and her demon hunting foster sister while they try and track down the murderer, preferably without being caught for using magic themselves, since it's illegal. And they'd be put in jail or executed for that themselves. So it's a very fine line, tense kind of creepy murder mystery.
Nice. It sounds, I love, sci-fi, fantasy, stuff like that. So definitely sounds interesting to me.
Yay.
So tell me a little bit about your characters.
So my main character is Harper, and she is an archivist for the cathedral in York. And for public knowledge, they have a small collection of things that they keep, as the real York Minster does. For their own knowledge, they have extensive underground networks of vaults and libraries where they keep a lot of arcana and spell books and all sorts of illegal contraband that they collect and store there. So she's supposed to do that as her main job, but she was brought up with her foster sister, whose family are demon hunters. And they have kind of split from the family business because Harper's a witch. But when these murders start happening, they're called in to help because they have that specialist training. And it very much focuses then on their bond as sisters.
That's awesome. What kind of training and what kind of things do the demon hunting sisters do?
So there's combat skills, obviously. So we've got a couple of smaller fight scenes in there, including with each other. Being able to sort of recognize supernatural influence, to be able to track down things that shouldn't be there and that other people maybe can't see. And also just how to kind of vanquish them and get rid of them where normal methods wouldn't work. You can't just lock something up in jail when it can turn into air and go out of little cracks. You have to have special methods.
Definitely. Who's your favorite character that you've written so far?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think in many ways I identify the most with Harper because she's the kind of bookish peacemaker of the group. But some of the side characters are really fun to write. And I think just for sheer writing of something completely different, actually, the antagonist is my favorite character to write because she is not human. And so her perspective and when we see the murders happening through her eyes, how she thinks of it and what's happening is very different to how we would perceive it as humans. And so it's been really fascinating to kind of get into that mindset.
Definitely. That sounds interesting for sure. What would you say the hardest part of writing this book was?
In terms of actually writing the book, I think kind of the hardest part in a way was getting it started, because I wrote book 2 first. And then after I wrote book 2, I was like, oh, this is a book 2. I should probably go back and write book 1. But then I had to kind of unpick the characters more, because I had to take them back to a point before they were part of this group. Because in book 2, they're already part of this kind of supernatural mystery group that's made up of the 5 of the characters that you see come together throughout the hiding. And so going back and be like, okay, so how did they form that group and how did those bonds come to be was an interesting challenge.
Your favorite part of writing?
It's really good for my mental health. So when I'm feeling really stressed and anxious, this is what I do. Long before I was trying to get anything published, is just to be able to go and kind of not even just be in my own head, but kind of be out of my own head and in someone else's, and following their journey. And kind of similarly with reading, I stop being aware of what is exactly around me. So I'm not thinking, oh, I'm typing now, or oh, I can hear that background noise. It's almost like this meditative, I am in this zone, and that's very relaxing. So actually just sitting and writing and then getting to the point where I can go, actually, I really love that sentence, because I can see it and I can hear it and I can smell it, and whatever other sensory input I've put into that scene just starts to feel so real.
Definitely. And I think good authors, when you're reading a book by a good author, you can see it, it's like you're living it. And like you said, you can smell everything, and describing everything is just wonderful. Sometimes some authors don't get as much descriptive details as others. So it's nice to hear about somebody who is giving a lot of those details, if that makes sense.
Well, I like to try and make it a bit multi-sensory. I mean, especially with this book, because the murders are sensory based. They're based on taste and sight and feeling and things like that. But in general, and I jokingly say that people should hire me to describe things. Like I have so many pages describing York Minster, most of which I then cut, because obviously it ruins the pacing. People don't need that level of information. But it's good for me, so that I can then take out the sentences that are best and work and put it in. So, if York Minster ever needs someone to rewrite their tourist booklet, I have the pages describing it.
That's awesome. But I think also for, I'm here in the States, so having a description of places that I've never seen before is, totally awesome when you're reading a book and you've never been there, but that gives you the feeling of being there.
I think especially with somewhere really old like York, when there is a large American audience, certainly my American side of the family are all massive Anglophiles and really love that kind of old world British side of things. Like when they come over and visit us here, York is one of the places we take them, because it does have that twisty ancient vibe to it.
That's awesome. And, the UK has been around for so long compared to, America, or even just North America. The buildings, the architecture, it predates, a lot of things here in the US. And I find that so interesting. I was talking to somebody that's in the UK earlier today, actually, too. And we were talking about the old buildings, the castles, everything like that, stuff that we don't really have here. Sure, we have stuff, a couple hundred years old, but nothing like what you guys have over there.
I had beta feedback on something I wrote once, and I'd pardon me, I described a castle that you could still walk around and go to, and I very much based it on the Tower of London and said that it was of that age. And one of my beta readers put in, I know this is fantasy, but this is completely unrealistic that there would be a building this old you could still use. I'm like, it's right there, I've been to it. So I think the scale, age is very different between America and Britain, and then your sense of scale on distance is very different.
Definitely. It's so funny to think that there wouldn't be anything that old still around, it shows, that some people are a little lacking lacking some education in that area.
Yes, it's probably not been the common thing that has come up, but it just amused me that someone did.
That's crazy. That's wild to think about. I would love to see some of the places. I love history and, Henry VIII and everything that he did and all the wives that went to the tower, everything like that. It would be a very interesting place to see.
Definitely. And that's one of the, because I said it's an alternate version. Obviously, there's magic in the Hiding Universe. One of the kind of key points in terms of the historical difference for them is during that Tudor reign and the Reformation is where we've got kind of key split in history, where in our England it went one way and we had certain monarchs and certain laws and followed certain religious rules, and in theirs it's gone a different way based on quite small changes, but with a big impact on what their politics became. So that's been kind of interesting to explore a bit of the view of witchcraft in that era and how that could then translate into ours. So I'm a nerdy person.
Dude, I get it completely. I spend hours researching stuff for my books. I look at ancestry and genealogies and my characters, I have family trees built for them. So
that's awesome.
It's very cool. So if you want somebody, connected to somebody in history that was a witch, then I probably got stuff like that.
Some of our characters could be related.
Exactly. So tell me more about the world in general, like the world that you've built.
So it's very self-contained at the moment. There are hints in the Hiding as to the wider world, but I wanted to keep it sort of central on this very insular, paranoid England, which, has no parallels to current politics at all.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how much people know about stuff going on over here, but with us splitting from Europe, and there's been a lot of problems and disagreements over kind of what acceptable foreign influence is and all of this kind of hyperbole is. So the England in this book is very cut off. It's not even connected to Scotland anymore. Scotland is much more okay with having magic things, and the English people don't like that. And so they're very guarded about who they let in and what contact they have elsewhere. And it's quite a dystopian state, with secret police who will encourage people to rat on their neighbours if they think they're using magic. And then as the series develops, I'm going to be able to kind of open that up and start exploring into other areas of the world and the differences there, and how actually this very insular behavior, both to the rest of the world and the fact that they have this huge anti-magic stance, is really bad for their culture, because they're stopping that diversification and stopping things that can actually help them.
Definitely. Would you say that the magic is something that's more seen, or is it more like not seen, if that makes sense?
That is tricky without spoilers.
Don't do spoilers.
I will not do spoilers. Harper's magic is very obvious to the reader because we see most of the book through her eyes. So we see her magic, we see her start to encounter other people with magic, but the official government line is that there is no magic in England, or very, very rarely, and if it pops up, we get rid of it immediately. And then we've got Harper running around, and she is a seer, so she can use magic basically to look beyond what's obvious in front of her. So they're, for example, following the last route that the victim took to try and find out how he was killed, and she can see that, like almost the ghost of him walking down, so she can recreate magically his murder and see what happened. So her magic is very visual and very obvious, but the other magic kind of starts just to creep in more from the sides.
Yeah. Would you say that there's any, like, it's a mystery story? Are there going to be like major cliffhangers in between the two books?
There's no major cliffhangers. The actual, like, the murderer in this one is, the murder is solved. It's a complete story arc of why these murders are happening and who was doing them. Where the thread kind of then continues is more around book 2, focusing on Harper's past. So I mentioned obviously that it's her foster sister as opposed to her birth sister. She was found when she was younger, and they thought that she was demonically possessed, and they exorcised that, not realizing that it was actually just her magic. And book 2 then focuses more on her exploring her own past and things that are uncovered a little bit during book 1 relating to that. But the main plot is definitely resolved. You can read it as a standalone book. I hate cliffhangers, so.
No, you're good. So you've got the second book already done. And when does that one come out?
So there is a collection of short stories coming out this September that takes place between book 1 and book 2.
Okay.
So it starts the day after The Hiding ends. And then over the next couple of months, there's various short stories that kind of show a bit of the impact of what Harper's done at the end of the book, which I won't say what that is because obviously that's spoilers.
Yeah. Yes, do not do that because I want everyone to go pick up your book.
And then book 2 then is coming in with that a little bit more established of, okay, this has been the consequence, and we can therefore spend some time delving into Harper's character and her personal past a bit more. And that one's coming out definitely. March 25.
You are a busy lady, that's for sure.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any plans on what you're going to write after that?
So there is a planned series. I know most of the plots of book 3 and 4 and kind of the broad overarching plot for the series. So I'll probably be heading straight into doing book 3 as my next kind of get it drafted project. And then I've got a book at the moment that I am sending out to agents. So we'll see if anything happens with that one. That one's a bit different. That's a techno romance fantasy. So a bit of a science fiction and fantasy blend. And depending on what happens with that will kind of depend where other things go as well.
Makes sense. And you're traditionally published, correct?
It's the press I'm with is a small press. So usually when we're saying traditionally published, it's like the big presses or one of their subsidiaries, because there's like 5 of them or something. So I'm with an independent press called Gate, who are based over in the US, actually.
Yes, with Heather Ventura.
Yes.
She's awesome. She's very nice.
Oh, she's lovely, yeah. We have lots of good book chats.
I know. I watched one of the live streamings on Facebook one day, and it was just awesome. I want to do something like that so badly. So
I'm going to do something similar-ish for the launch of the short stories. I've got together a few fantasy and horror writer friends, and we're going to do a live streaming with reading some excerpts from our books and having a bit of a chat about them, and just kind of have a little launch party and reading session, but live so people can comment or listen or whatever.
Yeah, of course. That sounds awesome, and it sounds like a lot of fun, for sure.
It should be just, writers hanging out.
Hey, best people to hang out with. If you had to write something in a genre you haven't written before, what genre would it be?
Ooh. I think something in like properly historical fiction, because kind of anything up until 1600, kind of anything from 0 to 1600, I'm like, I would write something that I did a lot of classics training at school, so that kind of Greek and Roman era, as you're saying, like the Tudor era, and prior to that, you got all the interesting medieval history in Britain, which is absolutely fascinating, and I love reading about. So I think I would go down so many rabbit holes of research, and probably you'd never see me again. But
my daughter was saying that to me the other day. She's like, don't start researching because it's going to be 5 hours later till you get back to writing. I was like, just a little bit of researching's not going to hurt. No.
Go into the library for one book and you've got this stack. So yeah,
I'd like to get started on one thing and then you go to 5.
The amount of research is a bit daunting. At least with the fantasy, I can go, well, I can do it 90% of what's actually happened here, and I can just stick this twist in myself.
Definitely. What does your family think about you writing?
My parents are extremely enthusiastic about it. They are actually much better at marketing and all that than I am. I went out for a cup of tea with my mom a few weeks ago. I got the tea, I came back, and she'd sold 2 books while I was at Till. How did you even do that? So they're really enthusiastic. My dad does a lot of writing for himself as well. They were both teachers, so he did a lot of writing of school plays and books for the kids at school. So there's always been that creative side of my family. And my husband is very supportive as well. He reads everything. Fantasy is not his normal genre, but he very kindly reads it all and gives me feedback on it.
That's awesome, and that's important. I think having a spouse that supports your writing makes it so much easier, so you can go and say, hey, I'm going to go write for a little bit, leave me alone.
It's like he's used to being a widow in November, because when it's National Novel Writing Month, I'm like, right, I'm going to draft an entire book now, and you will see me in 30 days.
Have you done I never say it right, that NaNoWriMo challenge thing? Did you complete it?
This book was one of them. I did the first 50,000 words in November. I didn't finish it, but I have done 2 where I hit 100,000 words in a month and actually finished the book as a first draft.
That's so wild. I tried so hard, and it just, with work and everything, it just did not happen. It was so hard. I hope to try again.
Other years I have completely failed, so it's just being whether the stars aligned with work and being able to ignore social commitments. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Now I have a toddler.
Yeah, that would be a bit of a challenge. Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but
no, at the moment he naps, and that is my writing period. So I just hope that he keeps the nap for a while, because that is my hour and a half to sit down and work.
Yeah, that would be rough. Not gonna lie. Because what happens when inspiration hits and you want to keep going, but you can't go?
Sometimes we do drawing, and he will sit there and he will draw, or he likes to sit and pretend to type. I'm like, Mommy's going to type for 5 minutes because she has this thing in her head she needs to get down. So you sit and you type on your keyboard. So he says to me, he says that he tells me he's writing a book. I'm like, okay, you write your book and I'll write my book.
That's awesome. You ever had the inspiration hit you when you're laying down to sleep and you've got to get something written down? Like you see the scene in your head and you literally cannot sleep. You have to get up out of bed and go write.
So many times. And it's a really bad thing to do, but I just keep my phone by my bed. And then I will text myself things, because if I put it in my notes app, then I won't remember the next morning that I did it at all. And I'll look for another note 3 months down the line and go, oh, what's this? So I send myself a time text for the next morning. And then at like 8 o'clock next morning, I'll get this huge long text of an entire scene or a conversation that I had to get down because it was in my head. And I would like to say most of the time it still makes sense. I have occasionally received ones and gone, what on earth was I thinking? But mostly it's stuff that genuinely I'm like, okay, I can use that. Because
I've had to get up and go back to it.
Sometimes that perfect wording does not occur until you are almost asleep, or you're in the shower, or just at whatever point is most inconvenient.
Yes, I can totally relate. Oh, yes. Do you feel that your books are geared towards a certain age range?
So they're definitely adult in, like, you wouldn't give it to a 12-year-old kind of way. Upper teens would be fine. There's nothing in anything I write that's overly gory or horrific or R-rated in any way. So I'd say from about 16 upwards, you can read them. In these books, the protagonists are in their mid-20s. So they're out of school. They're kind of established in their world, but they're not at the we've settled down and everything is what it should be. We've been married for 50 years stage. Other ones I've written are more like towards people in their 30s. I'd say probably I've never written anyone who's older than me, but I tend to go for that kind of 25 to 35 from the characters. But I reckon, I say, anyone in terms of age range will be able to read it.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like, I have a 15-year-old and she reads stuff geared towards older, young adult type of thing. And I'm always curious if books are appropriate or not. Mm-hmm. So I always ask, because that's a tough age,
Yeah.
15, 16, 17, like, is it too graphic for them or is it okay for them?
I've definitely read things that come under the young adult category that are more graphic than this. I'm really squeamish, so I do not write things that are overly graphic. So it's a little bit creepy, but it's not.
Yeah, my daughter listens to audiobooks. That's awesome. My daughter listens to audiobooks, and there was this one day she was listening to like a werewolf shifter, something geared towards young adults, and it was very graphic in the romance area. I was like,
there's a lot of young adult that I think I would not have been comfortable reading this at 16.
Yes, I wouldn't feel comfortable reading some of that at my age.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe next time something not so graphic. She's like, yeah, I just ignore it.
That's a very good way of looking at it. But, I mean, this series of books, and particularly this In the Hiding, I think it's got to be kind of freakish in fantasy at the moment because there is no romance. The whole point was that I wanted to focus on this platonic and familial set of relationships. So there isn't like a romantic subplot even. It is the focus of these two women, and then as other people start to join them, kind of this found family that they create from it. So definitely no worries about there being weird sex scenes or anything. You're fine.
Nice.
Also, my mother's read it, so even if I was writing something where there was a romantic relationship, it wouldn't go that far because my mom reads it.
Yeah, that would be really hard to deal with a family member reading some very graphic scenes. I feel like I don't write graphic like that either, so I couldn't imagine my family members reading stuff like that. But my family's more conservative, so.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have that conversation with my godmother anytime soon, so.
Why did you write that sex scene in that book? I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, just like, I've marked certain pages, just don't read page like 97 to 101. And
Nice. Yeah, those pages you're not going to want to read. It's just too much. Just skip over that, go to the next part.
Yeah.
You'll be good.
People who write these books are braver than I am.
That's for sure. Not saying they're not good by any means, so don't think that, but I don't have enough guts.
No, I mean, my one of my other books I've written was written as a romance, and it took like 60,000 words before I could get the characters to even kiss. And I was like, come on, I've given you all these opportunities. And they were just like, nope, we're not going to do it. So.
Have you ever had a character that starts off one way and then like you step away from the book for a little bit and you come back and the character is going a totally different way?
They definitely have minds of their own. And I have one character who is one of the main characters in book 2, the one that's coming out next March, who isn't in book 1, but was in the original book 2 when I wrote it and was like, oh, I need to go back. And between the original time when I wrote the book 2 and now coming back to it to write it properly, having done and edited book 1 and all of this, and therefore needing to make a few plot changes and sort of things, he has decided that he does not want to do what he was originally written as at all. He has opinions and he wants to do things a different way. And I'm like, okay, but this is the plot. He's like, yeah, I don't care.
It's hard. Sometimes they just will not stick to it and want to go somewhere else.
But even though he wasn't in book 1, his character has obviously just been developing in the back of my head. And now he's going, well, they've had these tweaks and changes because you've written a different book. And I've had these other changes. I've not stayed static either.
That's awesome. Who would you say was your hardest character to write?
I think Saqib is probably the most difficult one to write, just because he is from such a different culture to mine, and he's also way smarter than I am. Not that I'm saying my other characters aren't necessarily, but he is a doctor. He's a forensic scientist with a doctorate, and he is from a Bangladeshi Muslim background and is male. And so, like, on so many different things, he is something different to what I am. And so it's been a challenge to write his character. I mean, even like down to his characteristics, and that he's very bubbly and outgoing, and he's quite extroverted in many ways. And I'm like, nope, I'm just going to be the one sitting in the corner with my book at the party. Whereas he's one bouncing over and going, hi, it's nice to meet you. Let me tell you about all this stuff. So
that's awesome. Yeah,
I love his character, and he is kind of based on a friend of mine who has that personality. And it's a great character to hang out with, and my friend is a lovely person to be around, but it does make it a challenge to write someone who is very different. And just to make sure that I don't accidentally portray him in a way that is inaccurate or offensive as well, with him having a different faith background.
Yeah. It's hard when you're not experienced in that way of life and you're trying to incorporate it into your story. But I think it's awesome that you are, and the diversity is something I'm really passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
So I love seeing diversity in stories. That's awesome.
Same. And it's like, I live in a very multicultural city here in Manchester, and I have friends who have different cultural backgrounds, different faiths to mine. And the idea that we should all just write books that only reflect our own would mean that we would never have that real life mirror where actually you do have friends who are of different theologies to you and different politics to you. And our books should have that, where people have to say, okay, you think A, I think B, but we're friends anyway. Or sometimes we're friends because.
Definitely. I love that idea. If you had to give advice to an aspiring author, what would it be?
To actually let people read what you've written, which sounds really blindingly obvious, because if you want to get it published, someone's going to have to read it. But it's also really hard to hand it to someone and say, tell me the things that are wrong with this. And for me, equally hard to say, tell me the things that are good about this, because I have a hard time accepting compliments. But one of the best ways to actually learn as a writer for me, and one of the cheapest ways if you don't have lots of money to go and do a degree in it or take courses, is just to talk to other writers and get feedback on your work and read things that they've written, but with that critical mindset, so that you can start recognizing things in your own work to edit as well. Plus, just having that support group is amazing.
That's awesome. And I agree. And that's really good advice. A lot of people, when I've asked them that question, they're like, just write. But I think you hit the nail on the head with your advice that you would give to aspiring writers, aspiring authors.
We're all writers. You put words on a page, or
Yep.
sounds, or however you do it.
Well, I mean, you're writing a book, you're a writer, you're an author. Just because you haven't published it doesn't mean anything. So, do you have any upcoming events or anything exciting you want to share with us?
We've got a couple of things. I'm doing my first live reading ever in June, so that's a little daunting. When I said I wanted to sit in a corner with the book at a party, I didn't mean with everyone looking at me while I read aloud from it. But I'm doing that. There's a big local event at one of the independent bookshops around here coming up in June. So that's going to be really exciting to go and meet some of the local authors as well. And then I'll be doing a few things online like that leading up to Reawakening coming out in September. So it should be a fun couple of months and completely out my comfort zone.
Like it. It sounds exciting and it sounds really fun. Your book, I haven't read your book yet, but I plan to. It sounds really good. I've seen, quite a bit about it. So
thank you.
You're welcome for sure. And I swear, like, my TBR list keeps getting longer every interview that I talk to people. It's like so many amazing books by like small indie publishers or self-published authors. And it's like, okay,
this
so many books.
Like the flip side of being involved in that writing community is, yes, you get to read all of these amazing things that people are writing. And sometimes you're reading these books well before they're published even. But then you're meeting all these people who have great books, and you're seeing all these small presses who have wonderful things coming out. And it's like, if I could just be like, have another whole me just to sit and read, I could probably still not get through my TBR.
That would make life so much easier to have like 2 or 3 of me to get a million things accomplished.
I'm pretty sure that I've read that book. It did not end well.
Yeah, probably not. But you could hope. But I do have to get ready to wrap up. If there's anything else you want to share, feel free to go ahead and share. Like I said, your book's going to be featured on our social media and our website and everything. So
it's exciting. Is it going to show up? Yeah, there it is.
Yes, beautiful.
As you can see, Misty Street in York there, so it gives you a little bit of a visual to go with those words we were talking about earlier.
It's beautiful.
So yeah, I think we've kind of gone into it pretty thoroughly.
Thank you so much, Thea, for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy day to meet with us and talk about your book and let us learn a little bit more about your world and your upcoming books. And I'm super excited to see where it all goes.
Oh, thank you very much. And hopefully after the next one, so I can come back and have a chat with you again sometime.
Of course, anytime you would like. And thank you so much. Everyone, don't forget to check out Thea Lyons, The Hiding, right?
Yeah.
The Hiding. Okay. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thea, it's been a pleasure.
It's been really great chatting to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Magnificent Authors Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to share another inspiring conversation with a talented author. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Magnificent Authors Podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming conversations with amazing writers. And be sure to check out Magnificent Mamas on our website, which is www.magnificentmamas.us, or on our Facebook page for more inspiring content from incredible authors. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What resonated with you the most? Head over to Facebook or leave a comment on our website and let me know. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep those imaginations soaring.